Enemies. People you despise or people that despise you. They're a big aspect of our social lives. For some it can be their math teacher, for some the government.
Excuse me, IRS!
And of course, some have none. But the important part is that to write a good story, you need an enemy. Even if it means that the main character is his own antagonist. And through what media have most of us been able to see great stories? Video games. Even though it might seem like it, this is not a video essay but a devlog. Lately I have been working on a roguelike video game, about which I already made a video. So far we have been able to make 3 playable characters, a room generation system, inventory and chests. Basically that's it. I mainly took care of the visuals, so there isn't many functional properties that I could speak of. The current part of the game takes place in a cemetery of sort, and in that cemetery resides a dead army. So the enemies you will be fighting will just be undead army personnel, for the most part. As of now I have 3 types of enemies figured out and 1 planned that I might do in the next video. Basically I just have an area 2D that senses when the player gets near and plays the animation that lets the skull out of the ground. Once it finishes, the skull starts rolling towards the player thanks to a navigation agent 2D. Once it gets close enough, it does damage. There isn't much to say about the skull, it was very easy to do visually since it's just a singular sprite and not a sprite sheet. With that out of the way, we can move on to the second enemy, the skeleton soldier. The skeleton soldier is going to be the main melee enemy of this part of the game. He has a big aggro circle, and once you aggro him he lets out a green light and starts following the player. Once he is close to the player, he periodically uses an ability. He stops dead in his track, waits about half a second and slashes his sword to do AoE damage. After which he starts following the player again, dealing damage with small punches, until he is able to use his ability again. Same as with the skull, he has an area 2D that sets up the aggro, after which he starts following the player with the navigation agent 2D. Unlike the skull, he has a sprite sheet, which means that I had to draw him walking, idling and attacking. Considering on what he's doing, his animated sprite changes. For the slash ability, there's a second area 2D that senses if the player is near enough for him to use it. If the ability is not on cooldown and the player is near enough, he is able to use the ability. Basically all that you see is just visual jargon, because the damage isn't done by the green slash, but by a big collision object that is spawned once the ability is used. Of course, the reach of the slash ability isn't exactly big, so I might change it later on. I am either going to make multiple abilities and make it so that whenever you get close enough, he chooses randomly between like 3 of them, or I'm going to make multiple types of skeleton soldiers, like a spearman or swordman or like an axeman. But that was the melee enemies, now we need range. What makes the skeleton archer different from the skull or the skeleton soldier is that instead of mindlessly following the player, he just sits on his ass all day and shoots whenever he can. If you get close enough to aggro the archer, a big red scope and a red line appears on top of the player. The big scope circles around the player 2 times until it reaches the middle, after which the archer shoots out an arrow that goes through walls. After you dodge the arrow, the archer is mostly a sitting duck that is waiting to be killed. I might add an auto attack to the archer, but I don't know yet because I have a melee type playable character and this could be a big counter. As everyone before, the archer gets aggroed through an area 2D, except that it makes the scope and the red line appear on top of you. No matter how far you go after you aggro the archer and he's in the middle of aiming, he will shoot nonetheless. The further you are from the archer, the easier it is to dodge the shot. The arrow doesn't trace you, it instead goes in the direction of the place you were standing in. The archer can also walk, but it is just to make sure that you don't leave aggro distance. Visually he was the hardest to actually draw, apart from the soldier and the skull, because I had to draw him pulling the bow, which isn't exactly fun. But with that, you have a player enemies, and that means that you also have death. I mentioned before that this is a roguelike, but I kind of lied. In roguelike games, once you die, you start from zero, as if you never played before. But as many pointed out in my last video, I'm making a roguelite, not a roguelike. That means that after you die, you do retain some resources, which means that your playtime doesn't exactly go in vain. But as you know, when somebody dies, he doesn't exactly get up. For that reason, I had to come up with a way that makes sense in the story for the player to go back from the dead and continue with his play, that being a necromancer. So right now, if you die, you will just spawn by the necromancer with full health. Because I wanted to test out a function that I would use with other NPCs in the game, I added the ability to speak with the necromancer, but there isn't much text to go through. I'm sad to tell you this, but this is all that I made so far. But if you made it this far, you don't have to worry, because I'm already working on the next video. The main problem I want to tackle in my next video is actually making this into a game loop. At this stage, when you turn on the game, you just spawn in this pre-made world, in which you can encounter the enemy's necromancer, or go into a gate that teleports you into a room-generated floor, with nothing on it. Also, there's no title screen, no UI, so like if you want to quit, you have to press Alt F4. Also, I want to make a real starter area and one enemy, which will be a mage. At first I was planning to add a ghost that you can't deal damage to, but if he phases through you, he does damage. But since there's exactly no counterplay, it wouldn't be exactly fun to go through. So I ended up with the idea that I will make a mage that spawns these ghosts, and you have to dodge them to actually kill him. Anyways, that's about it. If you want me to do something more specific, like work on the weapons that I mentioned in the first video, or just give me some ideas, you're welcome to do so in the comments. I'm looking forward to any feedback, even if it means that the feedback is negative. Anyways, don't forget to subscribe, and I'm out.